So if you're familiar with the concept of limerence, you know that it's kind of an obsessive tunnel vision addiction for another person. And we also know that limerence always ends. It always has an expiration date. But if that's true, and if the limerence has ended either for you or maybe your girlfriend or your wife, if it's ended, can it ever come back, either with that person or with somebody new down the line? That's what we're covering today in this video. Hi, I'm Jeff Campbell from DivorcedParentsClub.com, and I'm glad you're here with me. So first, we've already defined what limerence is, and if you want to dive in deeper to that, I do have some other videos on that subject that go a lot deeper into what it is and what it's not. But how do you know if limerence is actually over? First of all, let's assume that it's your girlfriend or your wife. So the person is going to be less obsessive. They're going to seem less manic, less frantic, less anxious, less on edge. When they're in that limerence state, their priorities often get completely out of whack and they stop prioritizing things that used to be really important to them. So you're going to start noticing a gradual return to a normal list of priorities and focusing on things that they actually care about, as opposed to focusing almost all of their time and energy on this other person. And it's going to be a gradual cooling off process. It's not going to be bam, abrupt like that. It's going to take some time and gradually come back down to normal. So what happens when the limerence fades? Well, first of all, just know that it's not likely going to happen at exactly the same time for both people that are in the limerent relationship. It's definitely going to happen first with one person and then eventually the other one. So one of the people is basically going to get dumped. And let's assume for this video that we're talking about the person who got dumped. So for them, it's going to seem heartbreaking. It's going to seem like their world is crashing down around them. This other person, they thought they were their soulmate. They thought they were destined to be together forever. And now, often very abruptly, it just seems like their world came crashing down around them. And now they're just left wondering and not having any answers to any of their questions. They're also beginning to realize, look what I gave up to be with this other person, and now this other person's gone, and have I lost everything of value in my life? If we're talking about a woman who was, say, married or in a serious committed relationship, maybe there's kids involved, then she's beginning to realize all of the things that she has either lost or is about to lose for this other person that now no longer wants to be with her. And that can be soul crushing. That can be devastating. And it can often lead to depression and things like that. Real quick, before we keep going, if you like this video, hit that like button for me. It sends a great signal to YouTube, helps me grow my channel and reach more people. I really appreciate you doing it. It's a great way to say thank you for me taking the time to make this video and other ones like it. And don't worry, in a minute, I am going to answer the question of whether or not limerence can truly come back. But first, let's talk about what triggers limerence, because if we want to know if it can return, we need to understand how it happens in the first place. So typically, limerence is an actual chemical reaction in the brain. It's a chemical unbalance. What it is low levels of serotonin and elevated levels of dopamine and norepinephrine. And those are neurotransmitters in the brain that basically act as messengers between brain cells. And they're literally are transforming how your brain is thinking. And so you almost can't help it. It's almost like a disease or an addiction. And the person involved in the limerence almost can't help themselves because it is literally a chemical reaction. It's not just a choice that they're making. They do have the ability to make different choices at any time, just like an addict does, but it can be very, very, very hard. Now the question you've all been waiting for: can limerence actually come back, either with the same person or maybe in the future with a different person? Generally speaking, if we're talking about a limerent relationship between two people that is now ended, it is not ever likely to come back again for both people. It's just very, very rare that that would happen. It is common, however, for one of those people down the line to kind of have some awakening of those feelings and curiosity. And it could be that they're still following them on social media, and so they're seeing pictures of them out there, and it's reminding them of how they used to feel about them, that obsession. And so those feelings can sometimes be triggered by things like that. Also, though, it's a chemical reaction that causes the feelings of limerence. And so our brain can get addicted to elevated levels of dopamine, for example. And if you're stressed out, maybe about something completely unrelated from this other person, your brain is going to naturally seek out ways to elevate the dopamine. And if you were in a limerent relationship for a long time with this other person, your brain has become conditioned to elevate the dopamine when this other person is involved. And so your brain may actually sabotage you. Your brain may actually begin to force you to think about this other person to elevate the dopamine levels to combat the stress that you're dealing with, which again is probably caused by something completely unrelated. So finding ways to manage the stress can help alleviate that return of those feelings for you. But again, it's very unlikely that the limerent feelings are going to return for both people at the same time after everything is completely ended. And again, this is similar to addiction. So if we think about addiction, we know that an addict can actually relapse, right? They may go to rehab 2 or 3 or 4 times and then still relapse every single time. So it is possible for that to happen. But again, as I've mentioned, it's not likely going to happen with the same person, but it can happen again with a different person down the line. Why is that? We've talked about it being a chemical reaction in the brain, but what causes that chemical reaction in the brain? Well, it can actually be caused by a fear of abandonment and a fear of rejection. And so a lot of us have abandonment issues. I know I do. When I was young, my folks split up when I was 6 months old. And then by the time I was 2, my mom remarried and we moved 1,000 miles away from my birth father. And I very rarely saw him until I was pushing into the teen years. So I have fear of abandonment stemming from childhood issues. And that's not to blame anybody else. I'm aware of those issues now and I'm taking steps to work on them. But that can really lead to my being susceptible to becoming limerent with someone else, and then that leads to that chemical spike in the brain. And so because of that, if I don't deal with my fear of abandonment issues, I am very susceptible to having this issue crop up again in my life under the right circumstances. What are the right circumstances? Well, it kind of takes a situation where everything is in place. Maybe I'm in a relationship with somebody, but it's not really working very well. Maybe they're an avoidant attachment style person and I'm an anxious attachment style person, which was the case with my now ex-wife that we split up 1.5 years ago. And in that situation, she tended to pull away, and that tended to make me want to pull closer to her. And then the more I pulled her closer, the more she wanted to retreat. And it was kind of a vicious cycle that basically ended up with our relationship ending because of that cycle, and because neither of us were really aware of that cycle at the time. I've spent a lot of time in the last 1.5 years learning about that cycle, learning about attachment styles. I do have other videos about attachment styles as well. So if that's a new concept for you and you're struggling to maintain successful relationships, it's well worth watching one of those videos. I'll put a link to that in the description down below, and you'll see a card up here for it as well. So the best way to ensure, let's say in this example, we're talking about you. The best way to ensure that you don't experience limerence again with someone new is to go to therapy and to deal with some of the issues that you might be facing, whether that's fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, anxiety, OCD, any of those kinds of things can kind of trigger some of these feelings. And so it's crucial that you take the steps to better yourself. Now, what about if it's your girlfriend or your wife? The limerent affair ended, she is back with you, and you have taken her back, but you're worried that this might happen again. So the same scenario applies. She needs to take steps to address the fundamental issues that led to her being vulnerable to a limerent relationship in the first place. And again, the best way to do that is going to be seeing a psychotherapist and just kind of getting to the root of those issues and working through them. When we do that, we almost assuredly eliminate the possibility of a future limerent relationship, because we're refocusing and reprioritizing, and we're getting to the understanding behind why we did what we did. It's just like when an alcoholic has that realization, they have that epiphany moment where they realize, I am an alcoholic. They may still be drinking, but they're now halfway to their solution because they've accepted who they are and the reality of the situation instead of pretending and hiding their head in the sand. Anyway, I hope this video helps you. I'll see you in the next one. And if you have an idea for a future video, leave me that in the comments down below.